Tonight on Ukraine Today, loud explosions and injured civilians. Russia launched another attack on Ukraine. This time, energy infrastructure and residential buildings were the main targets. Should Ukraine strike Moscow and St. Petersburg? Did Donald Trump really support this idea? Spoiler, it's way more interesting than it might seem at first glance. Weapons for Ukraine. Will NATO pay for American Tomahawks? And when will the next Patriot systems arrive? The Kremlin is raising the stakes. Satellite images show major construction at Russia's nuclear-related facilities. All that and more in Ukraine Today. Hello, we are from Ukraine. My name is Volodymyr Robchun. Subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. We'll start with last night events and the battlefield situation, and then head to Moscow and St. Petersburg. Loud explosions and injured civilians. Russia attacked Ukraine once again, targeting energy infrastructure, industrial facilities and civilian homes. Damage reported in Vinnytsia, Dnipro, Kharkiv, Odessa and Donetsk regions. At least 15 people were injured, including one child. And here's something to notice. It's the second day in a row with attacks, but not massive ones. And for the second day, US President Special Envoy General Kellogg is in Ukraine. Coincidence? President Zelensky doesn't think so. He said it in an interview with a Newsmax journalist.
General Kellogg arrived in Ukraine, and there were no massive bombings for 2 nights in a row. This is a very interesting example. There were no heavy attacks this night and the previous night. Even people are already joking about it, saying that we should give General Kellogg a Ukrainian passport and leave him here, and that Americans should come to us more often, because then Russia would bomb less. What does this mean? That Putin deliberately bombs civilians, but when the Americans are here, he doesn't do it. Putin will try to intimidate, blackmail, and create tension, but he does not go for a full escalation. This means one thing: Putin is afraid of America.
In the past 24 hours alone, Russia lost at least 1,170 troops killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, that's 1,037,460 soldiers. Also destroyed 3 Russian tanks, 2 armored vehicles, 49 artillery systems and dozens of other enemy units. Ukrainian hackers crippled one of Russia's largest drone production facilities, the Gaskar company. That's according to Ukrainian military intelligence. Over 47 terabytes of data were wiped, including backups. The company lost access to the internet, to production systems, and even security passes were revoked. Ukraine now has full technical documentation of how Russian drones are built. President Trump did not encourage strikes on Moscow or St. Petersburg. That's according to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. And yes, I hear you. What? Let's break it down. The Washington Post and Financial Times reported that Trump supported Ukrainian strikes on Russian cities. Allegedly, it happened during a call with President Zelensky. But Leavitt clarified, Trump only asked about such attacks and said he's trying to stop the war. Later, when journalists asked Trump whose side he's on, he said,
"No, I'm on nobody's side. Why? I want to, you know what the side I'm on? Humanity's side. I want to stop the killing of thousands of people a week. I want to stop the killing. I want the killing to stop in the Ukraine-Russia war. That's the side I'm on."
Well, he said what he said. Case closed. Actually, no. Let's look deeper. Russia is committing crimes against humanity in Ukraine. Trump said he's on the side of humanity. So definitely not on the side of the invaders. Second, leaked info about private talks is often released on purpose. Not official statements, but messages nonetheless. Chances are Washington wants the Kremlin to hear about potential strikes on Moscow and St. Petersburg. It's a way of saying, you really want this war to hit your capital? No. So let's talk. For real. Not through some fake peace delegations led by so-called alternative historian. Trump really does want this war to end, and it looks like the US is ready to back its diplomacy with firepower. Sometimes that works better than words alone. Now to weapons. The US will supply Ukraine with arms and NATO will pay the bill. A win-win. American taxpayers are happy and Ukraine keeps getting what it needs. More in this report.
10 billion for arms for Ukraine, 17 Patriots, ammunition, missiles, and even calls to bomb Moscow. All of this is no longer just a dream, but reality. The US is officially back on the side of good.
I hang up the phone with Putin, say it was just a routine conversation, and then missiles fly towards Kyiv. Talks don't matter.
The rhetoric is surprising, but there's a catch. The US isn't giving Ukraine weapons for free, it's selling them. And it's not Kyiv that's paying. Here's how it works. NATO members buy weapons from the United States and then they transfer them to Ukraine.
Donald Trump has this problem. He doesn't actually propose any solutions himself. He just jumps on board with successful options. And a successful option emerged, which was discussed at the Alliance Summit, where on the one hand, the Alliance agreed to Trump's demand to increase defense spending to 5%. And that's important. But these 5% must necessarily include aid to Ukraine. Thus, the countries that are helping us don't have to stretch themselves thin, looking for ways to both meet the alliance's requirements and help Ukraine repel Russian aggression.
In this way, everyone wins. The US profits, Ukraine gets the necessary weapons, and Europe isn't stretched to the breaking point. In Germany, Trump's initiative was immediately welcomed. German Chancellor Merkel stated that he had discussed the purchase of American weapons by Europeans with the American president several times, and added that Germany would play a decisive role.
We are doing this in our own interests. This will help Ukraine defend itself against Russian bombing terror. This is the only way to increase pressure on Moscow in order to finally reach a peace agreement. Finally, we are showing that we are moving in the same direction as our security partners.
Security for Ukraine is priority number one, and security means air defense systems. Kyiv has repeatedly requested additional Patriots, and in this regard, Trump was truly surprising as he promised to deliver far more than just one or two systems.
In general, this agreement is about both ammunition and missiles. We have 17 Patriots ready for shipment. A large number of these 17 will be sent to the battlefield. This can be done quickly.
However, there are some nuances to this as well. Trump promises them in the near future, while German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius states that the delivery of the first system could take several months. At the same time, Trump himself stated that several countries that have Patriots are planning to exchange them. That is, they will transfer them to Ukraine and the US will replace them. There are also plans to provide Kyiv with short-range missiles, howitzer shells, and medium-range air-to-air missiles. But for now, everything is vague. No one knows the exact list except for the Patriots. And most importantly, it's unknown when the deliveries will begin.
Indeed, there's still a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions. Well, I'd really like this process to start as soon as possible. And, well, basically, it's profoundly in Trump's own strategic interest to actively commence selling substantial quantities of weapons to European nations and diligently supplying them to Ukraine, because that particular approach will ensure America receives significant financial returns, and he'll be able to proudly report to his loyal voters that he successfully compelled Europe to acquire much more American-made weaponry and so on and so forth, demonstrating a clear economic and political victory. Moreover, it's already clear to everyone that in order to get concessions from Putin, you have to put serious pressure on him. Any kind of concession is seen by him as a sign of weakness, and in response, he starts to get rude and act cocky.
Trump also plans to put financial pressure on Putin. The American president gave Putin an ultimatum: either a 50-day ceasefire or the US authorities will impose 100% tariffs on Russian goods, as well as secondary sanctions against countries that buy oil from Russia. But in the European Union, Trump has already been criticized for this. Not for being tough, but for being too slow. The head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, believes that the 50-day period is too long.
On the one hand, it is very positive that President Trump is taking a firm stance toward Russia. On the other hand, 50 days is a very long time if we see that they are killing innocent civilians.
There is also the question of whether such a changeable Trump might switch sides again. But on the plus side, the Russians are only angering the American president so far. After all, it was Medvedev who was the first to respond to Trump's initiative, and he has long irritated the American president. On top of that, he poured more fuel on the fire by claiming that Trump had supposedly issued a theatrical ultimatum to the Kremlin.
The world held its breath, waiting for the consequences. A militant Europe was disappointed. Russia didn't care.
Whether this is really the case, we will find out very soon, and we sincerely hope that Trump has stopped playing games and now truly understands all the threats.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Also, don't forget about the 50 days ultimatum from the White House to Russia and its partners. It's simple. Make peace with Ukraine or face 100% secondary sanctions. The Kremlin pretends not to care, but it's suddenly very loud about Trump's words. First, Deputy Chairman of the Security Council Dmitry Medvedev, then Russia's so-called Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
As Dmitry Peskov said, we want to understand what's behind this statement. 50 days. It used to be 24 hours, sometimes 100 days. We've seen all that before. And we really want to understand what is driving the President of the United States. It's clear that he is under enormous, I'd even say indecent pressure from the European Union and the current NATO leadership, who are shamelessly supporting Zelensky's demands to keep pumping him with modern, including offensive weapons, at the growing expense of taxpayers in Western countries.
Classic blame shifting. Lavrov starts with, as Dmitry Peskov said, as if it's not his opinion. Then he wonders what moves the president, not what guides him. The puppet Trump and the evil EU and NATO. And just listen to this. Zelensky keeps demanding weapons, costing more and more to Western taxpayers. Oh really? Lavrov suddenly cares about Western taxpayers? Of course not. This is just another attempt to blame Ukraine and the West instead of Russia, who's really responsible. And of course, no Kremlin panic would be complete without nuclear threats. Satellite images from May and June show major construction at facilities linked to Russia's nuclear forces. Details in the report.
The Russian dictator is secretly building nuclear bases.
At that particular time, we took all the absolutely necessary steps, very promptly indeed, precisely in a most timely and efficient manner, so that now, at this present moment, we are comfortably at the level we currently are. Yes, certainly with some minor issues and a few lingering problems, but still, undeniably, at the impressive level we are presently at.
For several years now, the Russian authorities have been covertly working on large-scale modernization of their military nuclear facilities.
This needs to be done delicately, carefully, but it absolutely must be done.
The Russian Federation has clearly realized that it will not have any peaceful years in the near future, because war is the very meaning for the Russian Federation. If there is no war, there will be no meaning, and there will be nothing to unite people around. Unfortunately, we have to admit that war in Russia has now become that very spiritual bond they dreamed of, searched for so long, and have now found. In other words, the purpose of killing their neighbors has become the meaning of life for the Russian Federation, or at least for the majority of its citizens. That is why they are doing everything to ensure that the Russian military-industrial complex develops, including making sure the nuclear component does not lag behind.
Satellite images taken in May and June by an American company show large-scale construction of secret facilities. New structures, roads, special checkpoints, passes and more are visible, notes the American publication Business Insider.
The nuclear component, the nuclear triad, is also a military element, a deterrent force, and it requires investment just the same. No one knows at what level the nuclear triad of the Russian Federation was or what the state of its support was. It seemed that funds were allocated, but how much of it actually reached its destination, how all these nuclear warheads were stored, which of them were active and which were not until recently, only the United States knew as they conducted joint inspections in Russia and vice versa in the US. That's why I think this is an attempt to modernize everything that was built during the Soviet Union era. That's the second point. It's an attempt to somehow intimidate Western countries, the whole world, by saying that we have weapons, we are modernizing them, and we're investing in them.
Among the recorded sites are military bases located in Belarus, Kaliningrad, Kamchatka, Murmansk, as well as on the Novaya Zemlya archipelago.
The Russian Federation is seriously considering the scenario of the so-called Suwałki corridor. That is direct confrontation with NATO countries, primarily Poland and the Baltic states, at the moment of creating a land corridor to the territory of the Republic of Belarus, to the Russian enclave of the Kaliningrad region. A similar situation is unfolding on the borders with NATO countries. First and foremost, this concerns the Kola Peninsula.
Western experts warn that in 6 months the last treaty between Russia and the United States limiting nuclear weapons will expire. And in this area, a new arms race is inevitable.
The Russian Federation is not taking into account the experience of the USSR, which could not withstand accordingly the military, political, and, most importantly, economic confrontation with Western countries. Apparently, the Russian Federation faces the same unfortunate outcome. Russia considered the possibility accordingly of withdrawing from this treaty, announcing its suspension. There is no such legal term as the suspension of a treaty. Nevertheless, this created the preconditions to say that Russia would unilaterally attempt to modernize accordingly its nuclear triad, which is exactly what is happening with these 5 bases as examples.
Russia uses nuclear facilities as a tool of pressure, threatening to use its nuclear warheads. What is actually behind Putin's loud statements is anyone's guess. One thing that is a confirmed fact is the problems with the Russian economy, which are making it increasingly difficult to wage war and produce more weapons.
Funding has been sharply reduced, and according to the Russian dictator's own assessment, in the next 3 years the defense budget will be cut. This is primarily due to problems in the Russian economy and the sanctions pressure from Western countries. Therefore, such large-scale reorganizations of nuclear facilities are most likely just another typical Russian long-term construction project. I should note that there are 11 of them on the territory of the Russian Federation. In other words, this already indicates that the budget of the Russian Federation does not allow for the simultaneous modernization of all 11 facilities.
Don't forget about the corruption factor. A huge number of people in Russia profit from these contracts. So I wouldn't rule out that this is also part of some business scheme, a business project to funnel an enormous amount of money. And even the FSB would have a hard time checking there because the level of secrecy is extremely high, everything is classified, everything is radioactive, and basically it's easy to cover up any traces. Well, that's how I see it.
So all these bases could simply be empty, but for Putin they could become yet another opportunity to blackmail and intimidate the entire world.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share this video. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you. Want to know the Kremlin's mood? Watch Russian propaganda! They've now turned their attention to Donald Trump, but he's not the only one. More in this report.
In the world of Russian propaganda, time seems to have frozen somewhere between 1943 and surrealism. Here, war is peace, destroyed cities are someone's mischief, and expensive potatoes are the result of a conspiracy by foreign enemies. The thing is, in Russia, potato prices have soared so high that this ordinary vegetable has turned into a real delicacy. Ordinary Russians have started to buy the second bread as potatoes were called in Soviet times as often.
Potatoes. It's just an absolute disaster. I already don't allow myself to buy cabbage unless I really, truly have to. And now potatoes, it's becoming a real and significant problem.
Have you noticed the rise in food prices?
Very much so.
So what should we do? The answer is already traditional.
What is it connected to? How should I know? The war. Basically, it's because of the war. Everything is going there. All the money is going to the war.
And what should we do about it? How can the situation be fixed?
Zelensky needs to be removed. everything will be fixed.
And as always, the atmosphere of patriotism is on the verge of boiling over. This time, a fresh incident has occurred. The wife of a soldier from the so-called SVU got into a verbal altercation with a veteran, but not of this war.
My husband will come back. I'm waiting for him. We are grateful to you for fighting there, but why are you insulting my husband today?
I'm not insulting him. I'll say it again. What is he doing there? What is he doing there? He's defending his homeland. Got it?
Residents of temporarily occupied Mariupol are once again outraged. Those who lost their homes are now facing a new paradox. New mortgage housing is being built on the site of destroyed residential neighborhoods. But no one is offering these new apartments to the former owners.
Where our homes once stood, there are now pits and broken promises. Not only were we not given new housing, but now they're planning to build mortgage apartments on the site of our destroyed homes. DNR Deputy Shishkina Elena told us directly at a meeting of residents from our two buildings at the administration that mortgage housing will indeed be built where our demolished building stood, and that up to 10% of the apartments from that building will be allocated to our city.
The occupiers also had some advice for Mariupol residents on how to go on living.
When asked why these apartments couldn't be given to the residents after all, there aren't that many families left, the answer was disappointing. Quoting, "These apartments are not for you. And in general, it's Ukraine that should be restoring the city and compensating you for your housing, not Russia."
And in today's reality, a new explanation has emerged for why Ukrainian cities lie in ruins. It turns out it's not the evil Russians who are to blame, but the Ukrainians themselves. According to some, the logic is that residents deliberately leave only damaged houses and destroyed streets for the Russians. They just don't want, the occupiers to come in and live comfortably in their homes.
This is the image of a humanitarian catastrophe that will be broadcast to the West. In fact, their goal, as I understand it, is for all the cities that, unfortunately, we captured to be left to us in such a deplorable state. That will take Bakhmut, for example. I exploded thoroughly, or Krasnohorivka, Avdiivka, just makes you want to throw up your hands in despair, right? They calmly, with a sense of duty fulfilled, the AFU withdrew from these cities. That's it. They left us a ruined, broken city.
Recently in Russia, Donald Trump's latest statements have truly shattered established patterns. On the federal channels popularly nicknamed Goebbels television, the US president is no longer considered their guy, especially after his remarks about Putin.
And today Trump almost sneeringly says, "I'm not satisfied with Putin." Not satisfied. He says, "I'm not satisfied with Putin." Why is that? Before our eyes, Trump is undergoing Bidenization. Trump, who used to be the only one who could talk to Putin, is turning into just another version of Biden. So does he really think, in all seriousness, that he can now talk down to us and we'll just obey?
Archpriest Takachev stated that modern women have stopped thinking about demographics and don't want to have children. According to him, women should be encouraged to give birth, while men should be protected since they are more valuable.
We've reached a time when women aren't giving birth to anyone anymore. They become weak, cowardly, immoral, and don't want to have children. We are disappearing, our numbers are shrinking, so we need to preserve our people. In other words, there's such a practice as preserving the nation. That is, we need to protect our people.
However, in reality, many men themselves willingly go to be disposed of, signing contracts to go to the front for 200,000 rubles. It seems that in this country, it's not so much the men who need to be preserved, but rather what's left of common sense.
And finally, real diplomacy, real partnership. Latvia's Prime Minister Evika Siliņa is in Ukraine with an official visit. She met with President Zelensky. They discussed defense support, drones, and Ukraine's EU integration.
We remain committed to supporting you, including military aid. 0.25% of our GDP will definitely go to Ukraine, no matter what. We're also pushing forward your EU integration track. I truly hope you will defeat Russia. Together, we must keep the pressure on Putin, push him away from Ukraine and from our homes too, because this is very serious for us. Thank you.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. See you next time.